Hey YouTube, Mike the Alpha Hoarder here. If you haven't been here before, welcome to my channel, and if you have, welcome back. Thanks for joining me. Today I have a video not about alpha cards, which does happen occasionally. Today's video is about this card, Exorcist from the Dark. So previously on this channel, I covered a buyout that I did of the Antiquities card Ashnod's Transmogrant. And that was in March of 2021 I did that buyout. And it was sort of a loose experiment based on a card that I like, an artist that I like. And I chose that card specifically because I didn't want it to impact the player market. Ashnod's Transmogrant is not reserved list. It was reprinted in Chronicles and 5th edition, which has quite a print run. And it's not all that playable as I understand it. And the results of that experiment were a very insignificant change in inventory and in market price. And today you can buy that card at near mint for basically what I was paying in March of 2021. It is a little bit higher, but as far as I can tell, it is higher only in tracking with other Antiquities cards. So I don't think that my buyout did anything. And that could mean a couple of things. So it could mean that the market was deeper than I expected, meaning there's just more of those sorts of cards out there. It just takes a little time for them to come to market. It could mean that the card's lack of playability sort of meant there was never really going to be a buildup of organic pressure. Or it could mean the existence of reprints either was absorbing excess demand, or just the fact that reprints were around prevented people from feeling the need to jump in or get their play sets or make any kind of moves. And so it's quite possibly the case that that's what led to the price just settling back down to where it should be. But the thing is, I don't know which of those it was. I didn't take great notes. You know, the experiment wasn't, the choice of card wasn't great. It just wasn't that well formed of an experiment. And so I did decide to do it one more time 1 year later. Now, just so it doesn't look like I'm kicking off a series on this, you know, full disclosure, I have done 2 buyouts, and then I did one other, I'll call it a half buyout on a sort of low-end Legends card that, you know, I don't think is really worthy of a video. But I have done 2 buyouts. Ashnod's Transmogrant was the first one. Exorcist here is the second one. And now I'm done. I don't have any intention of doing more buyouts. I'm really here to collect. I do have a degree in physics. One of my degrees is in physics. So experiments and data collection, all that, it actually does appeal to me. You know, I am that kind of nerd, so I had some fun going through all this. But on the whole, you know, messing with markets and card access, it doesn't really do anything for me. I did consider this experiment worth that cost because I want to understand the market depth and the dynamics of these old cards, you know, especially considering how invested I am into them. But anyway, so that leads me to this video today. I wanted to share some data, tell the story. And yeah, you know, usually this kind of stuff isn't that public. You'll see sometimes a video with, you know, a bunch of cards out and someone talks about their buyout, but you can't really get to the data. And so that's what I wanted to do here. I'm just going to actually show you the raw data and make of it what you will. Maybe someone will find it useful down the road. Maybe it's worthless. I don't know. So, Exorcist. I chose this card for a couple of reasons. First of all, the art. Drew Tucker is probably in my top 3 favorite artists. I would say Mark Teeden, Richard Kane Ferguson, and then Drew Tucker are my top 3. With, you know, the exception of occasional one-off pieces. Amy Weber's Time Walk is my favorite single piece. But anyway, Drew Tucker, I just love his art. You know, I'm not an art aficionado, so I don't really know what I'm looking at here, but it's watercolor or something. It's something about it that just makes it very distinct from other art of the time. And I also love how he keeps things a little bit abstract. I kind of feel that leaving a bit more to the imagination sometimes makes the art actually more impactful. And this is just sort of creepy, and, you know, a lot of his cards are like that. So I love the artist. I actually like the ability too. I searched around a bit and it doesn't look like this card is played with all that much, but I've got a wacky little deck that's full of these guys. I turn everybody black. He kills all the creatures. I've got a circle of protection. And then I've got a little guy with protection from black that, slips through and punches the other guy in the nuts. It's fun, so I like the ability. I like the artist. This card is on the reserved list. Now it has an Italian printing, so I consider that a little bit of an out, hopefully, so that if there was a player impact, it wouldn't be so bad. But this is reserved list, and I did feel I needed to test that this time around. So, there are 193... No, that's not right. There are 109... hold on a second.
A few moments later.
Sorry about that. I don't want to give bad numbers. There are 134,000 copies of this card printed, and I am the proud owner of 1/4% of them, which isn't bad. So when I started this, I committed to a budget of $10,000, and I was originally figuring that would last me, 4 to 6 months. I thought this was going to be a really slow sort of buyout. And so I figured $10,000 or 500 cards, but based on the price, I didn't really think I'd hit the 500. And, as it happened, I got 331 copies. Most of them are in nice condition, but not all of them. There's definitely some real beat up ones mixed in here too. But mostly LP or better. And like I said, I wanted to try to do this quietly and under the radar. And the reason for that is because I wanted to have most of the data. I wanted most of the buys to be coming from me. And that way I could really track what was happening with the price and the inventory and the refilling and all that. Unfortunately, that didn't go so well. I think either during or after the second week, the dark just went nuts. It was sort of the return of buyouts after a hiatus at the end of 2021. And, the big channels picked it up. MTG Moxman, mentioned this card a couple of times. Rudy mentioned the card, although he didn't give it a thumbnail. He was talking about Frankenstein's monster, I think, a few others, but he mentioned it in passing. And I don't know if that's because I was too aggressive the first week or if just by coincidence other people were jumping in around the same time. But in any case, once the big channels started talking about dark buyouts and this card got a mention, the sales went a little bit nuts. And I admit at that point, I started getting a little anxious. I was already into this, 2 weeks, and I started buying, I think a little bit too aggressively. Certainly wasn't going to last 6 months at that point. But, I took detailed notes this time. And I'm going to show all that to you. And again, the goal here is, can we figure out the market depth? Unfortunately, I don't think the data does give all the answers I wanted. It's one of the reasons I've decided I'm done with buyouts. There's too many variables. You don't get clear. You don't get a clear ability to extrapolate, like I was hoping. But nonetheless, there is some interesting data. There are some patterns, and I figured I'd make it public, put it out there, and see. And then this is particularly notable because what I'm going to show you here is what was accomplished with $10,000. Now, $10,000 on the one hand, that's a lot of money, right? Like that's a lot of money. But on the other hand, that's not a lot of money. 5 or 6 friends working decent lower middle class jobs, they could pool that together. $10,000 is well within reach. And within the whole Magic the Gathering hobby, there are a lot of friend groups of 5 or 6. And as it turns out, $10,000 can do a lot. And so that's why this is interesting. So let's go to the spreadsheet. I tracked the date, the platform, the seller. I did blank that out I originally didn't have that. It's not blanked out on my copy, but I didn't want to make it too. I didn't want anyone to be able to make it too clear who I am as the buyer in some of these cases. But anyway, then the quantity, the price of each, and I sort of tracked the budget as I went. And then what I did is I broke it into weeks so that at the end of each week, I can see what inventory was available, what the average buy price was, and things like that. So I started week 1, purchased 92 cards. The average price during that week was $23.50, and we ended the week with 438 cards available. So the week started, there was like 520 something. So after the first week, we're down to 438. I tracked, sort of the big US sites plus Card Market. I did go to Card Market here. Obviously that's not all of the inventory, but it's a good metric. So this number is not exactly right, but the changes in that number are definitely representative of what's going on. Okay, week 2. During the second week, I purchased a further 83 cards. The buy price has already jumped from 23 up to 27, 15% or so, whatever it is. And the available inventory is 324 cards. So if you do the math, we were at 438. We ended the week with 324. That's an inventory drop of 114. I only purchased 83. So, other people were purchasing cards. Some cards were refilling on the market, but you can see on the net, it's definitely just dropping. Inventory is just dropping and not refilling. Week 3. I buy a further 60 cards. The average price is now $30. So from week 1, the 23 up to 30, we're now up 30%, about 15% each week. And now there's 316 cards available. So again, 324 minus at least 60 that I bought, but we end up at 316. So now you can see week 2, inventory starts to, during week 3, after week 2, inventory starts to reappear. And so enough cards come to market that cover basically everybody else who bought the card, plus some of the ones that I bought. I've heard other people say that anecdotally, but it is backed up by the data. So there is about a week to a 2-week lag between movement on a card and inventory refilling, which makes perfect sense. All right. Week 4. We go up another 12% in the buy price. And once again, there's a net positive on inventory. Not a net positive, but I bought 53 cards. And we end up 274 is not 53 cards down from where we were last week. So all of the cards that were bought by other people, plus many of the ones I bought, were refilled on the market. So it is still a net negative, but it's slowing by a lot. The refill is pretty much keeping up with the buys, not quite. 274, that is 60% of the original supply. So close to half of the supply is gone. Price is up 30%. There is an attempt on the supply side of the market to meet the demand side. And paying $34.50 average per card. Now week 5, we see a plateau in inventory. And as you might expect, also a plateau in the price. So at this point, during this week 4 to 5, the supply and demand is in balance. There are enough cards coming to market to keep up with the buys. So this is either people locking in profits, people digging through bulk and listing their cards. But leading up to this point, we're sort of ramping up that process. And it is now in full swing, keeping steady. And then something interesting happens on the next week. So I didn't realize that was going to be the last week when the week started, but you can see I'm 80% through my budget. by the time we're at week 5. Again, with the sort of all the other hype going on, I kind of tripped into a bit of a sunk cost fallacy, and rather than just pulling the plug on the experiment, I probably just rushed it too much. But I had already started buying, and I didn't want the inventory to vanish to other people doing buyouts and then completely miss out on the data. So I ended up going way more aggressively than I thought. My budget is almost spent, and I didn't realize we were about to trip over a little ledge here, and that's what happens in week 6. So again, week 4 to 5, supply demand has found a good equilibrium. Sellers are hurrying to bring all of their cards out of bulk, lock in profits. People who had done earlier buyouts on this card maybe were starting to sell some into the hype. That changes abruptly in week 6. So I only bought 22 cards. And as far as I'm aware, a new buyout didn't start. Things were going at roughly the same rate. So despite my only buying 22 cards off of 273, we end up down at 242. And then the price jumps from 35 about to 58. So what that tells me is the demand outlasted the supply refill. And as soon as that happened, all of the additional buys, instead of grabbing cards that had just been listed, began to chase the existing cards up the order book that had all been listed earlier at higher prices. And that causes a giant spike in the price. And as a consequence of that, my budget is basically burned. And so at the end of this week, I was done the experiment. I don't know if other people kept going, but it did sort of felt like things had slowed as the price started taking off. I think it cooled everybody off. And so at the end of this experiment, I had acquired 331 cards, as I mentioned. As the week closed, the price of near mint was basically $120, pretty firm. But it corrected really fast, like within a day or two, down to 75. And so at the end of, right out of the gate, the price is up 300%. Okay, and then I started tracking what happened in the weeks that followed so that we could make some sense of, it takes longer for a market to react to something like this, so I wanted to see what would happen. So, okay, this is right after. So then, the next data point I have is at 1 month out. So, at 1 month out, the near mints are now around $50. So like I said, immediately off the bat it was 120, but that very quickly dropped to about 75. Over the course of the following month, that drops 30% to about 50. So at this point, we are double the cost of the pre-buyout price for near mint. The market has recovered by about 20%. 305 cards are back on the market. And there is a steady stream of new supply. This shows me that the supply just moves so much slower than demand, especially during buyouts, that it really makes the market depth very opaque. Because you can bottom out the market depth like we did in week 5, but that's not actually the bottom. So it makes it very difficult to get clear answers on this. So now, a month later, we are 2 months out from the end of the buyout. Sorry about that, little glitch. Had to do a cut there. Okay, so a month later, we are 2 months out. So at this point, the inventory has recovered by 8%. Now, we're still quite a bit down from where we were when we started, but what's interesting is that this is about where the inventory was in week 3 of the experiment. And the average buy price during week 3 was $30.09. And yet the average price here at 2 months out is $43. So despite the supply being the same, the price has gone up. So this tells me that there is some emotion in the market still as it's reacting to the fact that there was a buyout. We're not strictly following supply-demand because demand has stabilized, supply has restored, price is higher. So I guess that shows that some of these changes just leave a permanent imprint. In any case, the market is still refilling, the price is dropping. We're still about double where we were when we began. All right, month 3. The market inventory has now recovered to more or less where it was during the second week of the experiment. There's 360 cards now available. A near mint is like $40, $45, a little less than double, averaging maybe 85% higher than when we began. And there are more listings at higher prices. So it seems like after something like this, people will list cards intentionally overpriced. Maybe anticipating the next buyout, hoping to catch that chase up the order book that sometimes happens at the end of these things. So that shifts the average price up, but I think it misrepresents the market. There are regular sales at this time on TCG Player in the this sort of lower range compared to what some of the listings show. All right, and then at 4 months out, market supply is in equilibrium. So you see 360, a full month later, 363. And then the average near mint price that I'm seeing has sort of landed at about $45, which is a 90% price increase from where it started. And as far as I can tell, the market has accepted that new price. There are sales at that price. There are auctions ending around that price. And our supply demand is in balance, which is why I've stopped collecting the data and decided to make the video at this point, although I will keep watching it. But it does seem like we have passed the noise and the waves that were made from the buyout, and we are now back in a stable market. So, in summary, there was about a 2-week delay from when the buyout started to when the inventory began to refill. There is an initial modest price increase, which seems to be sellers testing the bids, and the increase remains, I won't call it slow, but it's steady but not aggressive until, in this case, week 6. So once the supply stopped refilling, then the buys chased the asks right up the order book, and that price of near mint, it jumped 500%. Within a month of a spike like that, that price is down by half. So, a takeaway from that is if you're after a card that was just hit by a buyout, after 1 month, you might see half of that price. By month 3, the inventory had reached a new plateau. The price had settled to about double the original price. That appears to be accepted. So, what happens from here is still an open question. With the Transmorgan card, I really just found everything stabilized back to normal. There was not organic pressure to keep it up. So I'll be interested to see. The real question here is, does lowering the supply by $10,000 worth of cards bring us beneath the depth of the demand? Because if it does, then there will be continued pressure from players or collectors or whatever. And so far the answer seems to be yes. The price is up 90% for near mint English cards. But it's only been 4 months. Will this card settle into line with the other dark rares? Or will sit higher than its counterparts from now on. I will probably follow up on this in a couple months. But in any case, the bottom line conclusion is that it takes far less money than you might think to seriously impact the market price of one of these cards. And the main reason for that just seems to be that the market depth is quite low. We bottomed out on the inventory basically after week 4. After the 4 weeks after sellers had started listing cards. So they noticed the move, they all rushed to start listing cards. That lasted maybe 4 weeks. And you know, that's not the true bottom because more cards started coming, but it does tell me that some of the suspicions we've talked about on this channel about attrition are probably right on. I do not think very many of these old cards exist. You know, only time will tell if that kind of capital has a permanent impact, but it really makes me curious about, say, what $100,000 would do to a card like this. You know, I mean, that is well outside of my means, but you know, I have met now some of the, I have seen how big some of the fish in this pond get. I'll put it that way. And there are definitely people, you know, avid Magic collectors and enthusiasts in this space, to whom $100,000 is no big deal. And it seems to me if they wanted to gobble a card up and they were willing to hold pressure on it for 2 months, really, was all I think it would take, a card like this would just be gone. That would be it. Vanish. And that's interesting. That's something to note. So, anyway, there's the raw data. Don't know if it's useful or not. Don't know if anyone found this interesting or not. This might be a little bit too technical and geeky to appeal to most audiences, but, you know, figured I'd share. So, if you watched this long, thanks for doing so. I really appreciate it. And I hope to see you at the next one. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, then I encourage you to start hoarding tulips, because I hear that that is the next big thing. See you next time.